There is one other color correction effect I asked you to add to the group of color correction effects, and that's tint. So we're going to take a look at the tint effect in this lesson. So go to Working Files, Projects, and open up 1107 using the tint effect. We're going to apply the tint effect to these two shots plus a black and white photograph. And really the black and white photograph is the main reason you want to use the tint effect. But here we go. I'm going to apply it to this clip here by selecting it and going to Effects and double-clicking on Tint, and watch what happens. Right away, it goes to black and white, goes to grayscale. Let me switch over to Effect Controls, and you'll see why. Tint maps color to another color. It maps black to a color and white to a color. That means anything that's black will then become the color you've selected. Anything that's white will become the color you've selected, and there'll be kind of a gradation between the two. Well, the default is mapping black to black and mapping white to white. So that's why we get this grayscale image here. To give the image a color, a tint, we want to work with mapping the white to some color. If we map black to a color, we tend to kind of wash it out. I'll show you what I mean. I'll click on this swatch and pick a color. Let's say we want to make it red, for example. And there, pick a color. I'm going to click on that, and like, wow, that happens. Then I click on white here and want to make it red too, right? We're going to keep it kind of in the red theme here. And that, ooh, that's just not going to work at all, right? So let's pick some other color besides red. How about yellow? You begin to see that it just kind of loses stuff when you map black to some other color besides black. But it's also kind of a cool thing if you want to have two different distinct colors here, black being one thing that's distinct and white being something else. But in the end, notice what happens to the dynamic range of luminance. It gets squashed. There's not much of a dynamic range here in the luminance or contrast when you map black to some color and white to some color. You usually just want to map white to something. So let's go back to the default here by resetting, and let's map white to something. So I'll click on that. I'm going to click on, let's say, red here now. Right down there, red. Let's see what happens. It gets pretty distinctly red, but look how dark it is. There's no light values there at all. Because we picked red that's kind of off to the right-hand side of the color swatch, this is actually a dark area of red. If you look over here, the Y value, which is the luminance value, is 95, when it can be as much as, let's say, 235 or more in this case. So I go to the light red, then we'll have a little bit more of a dynamic range to our luminance here, but not all the way to 100. It gets this kind of dull look. That is the unfortunate downside to working with tint. It tends to reduce contrast and dynamic range of luminance. But anyways, that's how it works. Let's take a look at the flower. Click on that to make it active and add tint to that. There you go. Let's change the color we're going to work on there to something else. Let's make it white. We'll go to yellow, let's say, which is kind of the theme of this flower. Now, if I do it there, it's going to be way dark, right? Because we're off to the right-hand side of the swatch. Go to the left-hand side of the swatch over here. It'll be gray too because it's up there in the gray zone. That won't look very good. So we're going to go down to the light yellow down there. And that'll be our best bet in terms of making it look a little yellow. Then you can say, how much do I want to tint? Do I want to adjust the tint, or can I bring in some of the original color like that? That basically is how tint works. If I want to say increase the dynamic range here to get a full dynamic range of Luma, then I can add the Luma curve there, double click that, bring it over. Then I can lift the dynamic range. I can lift the whites up there to 100, but it does kind of wash out the yellow when you do that. All right, let's move on down to I think the main purpose to use tint, and that is to use it with a photograph. There we go. Select it to make it active, go to Effects, Apply Tint. It's going to take our black and white photograph and make it black and white. Oh no. Let's change the mapping the white to something. Let's map it to something like sepia. So I go up here to the orange there, and that I think probably works as sepia. Is that going to work for a sepia? Click on that. There you go. Got this kind of sepia look, which looks pretty good. Contrast is kind of low here. Let's take a look at the amount to tint, though. We can adjust that since it's black and white behind there anyways. Kind of like that. That's beginning to work. If I want to change the color, I can click on the swatch again, maybe make it a little bit more orange like that. Something, however you want to do it. But we're creating this sort of sepia look to this. And now if we want to increase the contrast, again, we go back and add Luma Curve to increase the contrast. And go over here and let's say, lift this guy up a bit, like so. Make it a little bit brighter. It still has that sepia look. We can have the amount to tint be a little bit higher now. Again, we can lift it a little bit more. It's kind of this double-edged sword. You bring one up, you bring the other one down. It changes things. But now we've increased the contrast, add a little tint to it, and there you go. That's how tint works. And I think the biggest use for tint is to work with old black and white photographs to give them that kind of sepia look.